The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Raven's Hollow Palace, but Princess Elena felt no warmth from its golden rays. She stood at the towering window of the east wing, her delicate fingers pressed against the cold glass, watching the royal gardens below, where gardeners moved like tiny figures in a painting she no longer cared to admire. 3 months had passed since the accident, yet the weight of loss felt heavier with each sunrise. The doctors had prepared her for many things when she married into the Aldermere royal family, but they never warned her about the crushing silence that follows tragedy. They never told her how grief could make a person feel invisible, even when surrounded by hundreds of servants and courtiers. Prince Marcus found her there, as he did most mornings now. His footsteps were soft against the marble, practiced in the art of approaching without startling. He had learned this gentle approach in recent months, understanding that Elena existed in a world made of glass, where even the smallest unexpected sound could shatter what little composure she maintained. "The breakfast is getting cold," he said quietly, though they both knew she barely touched her meals anymore. Her once vibrant figure had grown thin, her famous smile replaced by an expression of perpetual sorrow that broke something inside him every time he witnessed it. Elena didn't turn from the window. "I keep thinking I'll see her running through the rose garden," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Charlotte loved those red roses. She said they looked like drops of princess blood, and that made them magical." Marcus moved closer, close enough to see his reflection beside hers in the window glass. His own face had changed in these months, too. The carefree prince who once charmed foreign dignitaries and danced at state balls until dawn had been replaced by a man who carried shadows beneath his eyes and worry lines across his forehead. She was magical, he agreed, because what else could he say? How do you comfort someone whose 5-year-old daughter was taken by a riding accident that no one could have prevented? How do you find words for a loss so profound that it changes the very air in a palace? The silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but heavy with shared understanding. Marcus had loved Charlotte, too, had been the one to teach her to ride the gentle mare that would later cause her death. The guilt ate at him daily, though Elena had never once blamed him. Perhaps that made it worse. "The council wants to discuss the memorial garden plans today," Marcus said carefully. "But I can postpone it again if you're not ready." Elena's reflection showed the faintest tightening around her eyes. The memorial garden had been her idea, a place where Charlotte's memory could live in beauty rather than sorrow, but every discussion about it felt like finalizing something she wasn't prepared to finalize. It felt too much like saying goodbye forever. "No," she said finally, her voice stronger. "Charlotte would want her garden to be beautiful. She would want it to have the biggest roses in the kingdom." Marcus felt a small spark of hope. It was the first time in weeks that Elena had spoken of their daughter without her voice breaking entirely. "Then we'll make sure it has the biggest roses in all the land," he promised. They stood together at the window, two people bound by love and loss, watching the world continue its relentless motion outside their bubble of grief. The palace staff moved through their daily routines below, unaware that their princess was slowly drowning in sorrow above them. Elena had always been the stronger one in their marriage. She was the one who handled difficult diplomatic situations with grace, who remembered the names of every servant's children, who could diffuse tension at state dinners with a perfectly timed laugh or gentle redirect. Marcus had always admired her strength, had relied on it more than he ever admitted. But strength, he was learning, was not infinite. Even the strongest person could be broken by the right kind of pain, and losing a child was a pain that could break anyone. Elena's strength hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed into something different. A desperate kind of endurance, like someone holding their breath underwater, hoping to surface before their lungs gave out. "I dreamed about her again last night," Elena said suddenly. She was older, maybe 10 or 11. She was wearing that blue dress we planned to have made for her next birthday, and she was laughing. In the dream, she could fly. She was soaring over the palace walls, free as a bird, and she looked so happy. Marcus swallowed hard. What did she say to you? Nothing. She just smiled and waved. Like she was going on an adventure and wanted me to know she was all right. Elena finally turned from the window, and Marcus saw that her eyes were bright with unshed tears, but also with something else, a kind of peace he hadn't seen in months. Maybe she was telling you she is all right, he suggested gently. Elena studied his face. This man who had become her anchor in the storm of grief. Marcus had his own pain to bear, his own guilt and sorrow. Yet he had never once failed to be there for her. He had postponed his own healing to focus on hers, and she was beginning to understand that this wasn't fair to either of them. I think, she said slowly, I would like to see the garden plans today. I think Charlotte would want us to create something beautiful for her. The relief in Marcus's eyes was immediate and profound. Are you sure? I'm sure that I can't stay frozen in this moment forever, Elena replied. Charlotte wouldn't want that for us. She always said life was for living, not for standing still. As they walked together toward the morning room where breakfast waited, Marcus felt something shift in the air around them. The grief was still there, would always be there, but it was no longer the only thing in the room. For the first time in 3 months, there was also hope, fragile and tentative, but real. Elena paused at the doorway and looked back at the window where she had spent so many mornings lost in sorrow. Tomorrow I think I'll take breakfast in the garden, she said. Charlotte always loved eating outside. Marcus nodded, understanding that this small decision represented something much larger. It was the first step back toward the world of the living, the first crack in the wall of grief that had surrounded them both. They didn't know that the hardest test of their healing was yet to come, or that Elena's journey back from the edge of despair would require more courage than either of them imagined. They only knew that in this moment, they were moving forward together, carrying their daughter's memory like a light to guide them through the darkness. The memorial garden plans lay scattered across the mahogany table like fragments of a broken promise. Elena stared at the detailed drawings, winding paths, rose bushes arranged in the shape of a heart, a small fountain where Charlotte used to love feeding the goldfish. Everything looked perfect on paper, but something felt terribly wrong. The marble for the memorial stone arrived this morning, Marcus said carefully, watching Elena's face for any sign of the fragile progress they had made over the past 2 weeks. The craftsmen say they can begin carving Charlotte's favorite poem into it by tomorrow. Elena's hands trembled as she picked up one of the sketches. The poem, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, had been Charlotte's nightly ritual. She would sing it off-key while Elena braided her hair before bed, always changing the words to make them sillier. Like a pizza in the sky instead of like a diamond in the sky. The memory should have brought comfort, but instead it felt like a knife twisting in her chest. I can't do this, she whispered, the words coming out strangled and desperate. I thought I could, but I can't. It's too final. It's like we're burying her all over again. The peace that had slowly built between them over recent days cracked like ice under pressure. Marcus watched helplessly as Elena's careful composure crumbled, her breathing becoming rapid and shallow. This was what he had feared most, that pushing forward too quickly would shatter the delicate healing they had begun. We don't have to decide anything today, Marcus said, reaching for her hand, but Elena pulled away, standing abruptly from the table. You don't understand, she said, her voice rising with each word. Everyone keeps telling me what Charlotte would have wanted, what would make me feel better, what would help me heal. But nobody asks what I want. What I want is my daughter back, And since I can't have that, I want to be left alone with my grief. The words hit Marcus like physical blows. For weeks he had walked on eggshells, carefully measuring every suggestion, every gentle push toward healing. He had consulted doctors, therapists, even priests, all searching for the magic words that would bring his wife back from the edge of despair. But Elena was right. No one had simply asked her what she needed. "Then tell me," he said quietly. "Tell me what you want, and forget what everyone else thinks you should want." Elena stopped pacing and looked at him with eyes that held too much pain for one person to bear. "I want to go to Charlotte's room," she said. "I want to sit on her bed and hold her stuffed rabbit and pretend she's just at her grandmother's house for the weekend. I want to stop pretending I'm getting better when I'm not." The staff had sealed Charlotte's room 3 days after the funeral, following the advice of grief counselors who insisted that removing painful reminders would help with healing. Elena had agreed at the time, too numb to protest, but Marcus could see now that it had been a mistake. They had locked away not just painful memories, but precious ones, too. "Then let's go," Marcus said, standing and extending his hand to her. Elena stared at him in surprise. "The doctors said—" "The doctors don't know Charlotte the way we do," Marcus interrupted. "They don't know that her room still smells like the lavender soap she insisted on using, or that she arranged her books by color instead of title because she thought it looked like a rainbow." Together, they walked through the palace corridors, past portraits of long-dead royals who seemed to watch with solemn understanding. The staff they encountered bowed respectfully but said nothing, sensing the weight of the moment. Word would spread quickly through the palace that the prince and princess were visiting the sealed room, but for once Marcus didn't care about palace gossip or protocol. The room had been kept exactly as Charlotte had left it that final morning. Her bed was still unmade, the covers thrown back in the haphazard way of a 5-year-old in a hurry to start her day. Her riding boots sat by the window, still muddy from previous adventures. Books lay open on the window seat, where she loved to read in the afternoon sun. Elena moved to the bed and sat carefully on the edge, as if afraid the mattress might disappear beneath her. She picked up Charlotte's beloved stuffed rabbit, Mr. Hopscotch, and held him against her chest. The toy still smelled faintly of Charlotte's strawberry shampoo and the peppermint candies she loved to sneak from the kitchen. "She was going to teach Mr. Hopscotch to ride too," Elena said, her voice thick with tears. "She said he was scared of horses, but she was going to be very patient with him, just like Marcus was patient with her." Marcus felt his own composure threatening to break. He had avoided this room, afraid that seeing Charlotte's things would make the loss feel more real. But now he understood that avoiding the room had made Charlotte feel more absent, not less present. "She was going to be a wonderful teacher," he said, sitting beside Elena on the small bed. "She had your patience and your kind heart." Elena looked at him then, really looked at him, and saw the depth of his own grief for the first time in months. She had been so lost in her own pain that she hadn't noticed how much weight he had lost, how the laugh lines around his eyes had been replaced by deeper creases of worry and sorrow. "I've been selfish," she said suddenly. "I've been so focused on my own pain that I forgot you lost her too." "You haven't been selfish," Marcus said firmly. "You've been surviving. There's a difference." They sat in Charlotte's room as the afternoon light faded, sharing memories and tears, holding each other and Mr. Hopscotch. For the first time since the accident, Elena cried fully, deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from the very core of her being. Marcus held her through it all, his own tears mixing with hers. "I miss her so much it feels like dying," Elena finally whispered. "I know," Marcus whispered back. "I know." As darkness fell outside Charlotte's window, something shifted between them. The grief didn't lessen, but it changed shape somehow. Instead of a wall separating them, it became something they could share, something that connected them to each other and to their daughter's memory. "The memorial garden," Elena said eventually, her voice hoarse from crying. "I think Charlotte would want it to have a place for Mr. Hopscotch, too. Somewhere he could sit and wait for her to come back and play." Marcus squeezed her hand. "Then we'll make sure he has the perfect spot." They stayed in Charlotte's room until the palace bells chimed midnight, talking about their daughter, planning a garden that would honor not just her memory but her spirit. When they finally returned to their own chambers, they carried Mr. Hopscotch with them, a bridge between the daughter they had lost and the love that remained. 6 months after Charlotte's accident, the memorial garden was finally ready. Elena stood at the entrance, her hand intertwined with Marcus's, both of them carrying a mixture of anticipation and trepidation that had become familiar companions in their journey through grief. The garden exceeded every dream they had shared in Charlotte's bedroom that night. Roses bloomed in every shade imaginable, their petals soft as silk and fragrant as summer evenings. The winding paths were lined with Charlotte's favorite flowers, sunflowers that stood tall like golden soldiers, lavender that released its calming scent with every gentle breeze, and tiny white daisies that formed a carpet of stars beneath their feet. At the heart of the garden stood a marble bench beside the fountain, where goldfish swam in lazy circles, just as they had in the pond Charlotte once loved. The memorial stone was simple but perfect, engraved not with traditional funeral words, but with Charlotte's own version of her favorite song. "Twinkle, twinkle, little star, like a pizza in the sky so far." But it was the small alcove beside the fountain that made Elena's breath catch in her throat. There, on a tiny stone chair perfectly sized for a stuffed rabbit, sat Mr. Hopscotch. He wore a miniature crown that the palace jeweler had crafted specifically for him. And around his neck was Charlotte's favorite necklace, a simple chain with a heart-shaped locket that contained a photo of the three of them together. "He looks like he's waiting for her," Elena whispered, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. But these tears felt different from the desperate, choking sobs of the past months. These tears carried love alongside sorrow, hope alongside loss. "Maybe he is," Marcus replied, his own voice thick with emotion. "Maybe this is exactly where he needs to be." They walked slowly through the garden, discovering all the careful details that had been included to honor Charlotte's memory. There was a small reading nook with books of fairy tales, a butterfly garden where monarchs and painted ladies danced among the blooms, and a playground area with a single swing that moved gently in the breeze as if recently vacated by invisible hands. "Your Majesties," came a soft voice behind them. They turned to see Margaret, Charlotte's former nanny, approaching with a group of children from the palace staff. The children carried baskets of flower petals, their faces solemn but curious. "The staff wanted to honor Princess Charlotte in their own way," Margaret explained, her weathered hands folded respectfully. "If it pleases you, the children would like to scatter these petals. They're from flowers that Charlotte helped plant in the kitchen garden last spring." Elena looked at the children, some barely older than Charlotte had been, others teenagers who remembered playing with the young princess during palace events. In their eyes she saw not pity or discomfort, but genuine love for her daughter's memory. "Charlotte would love that," Elena said, her voice stronger than it had been in months. "She always said flowers were nature's confetti." The children scattered throughout the garden, releasing handfuls of rose petals and daisy heads into the air. The petals caught the afternoon sunlight, creating a shower of colors that danced and swirled before settling gently on the paths and benches. It was magical and beautiful, and exactly the kind of celebration Charlotte would have delighted in. As the petals fell around them, Elena felt something she hadn't experienced since the accident: joy. It was small and fragile, mixed with sadness, like sugar stirred into bitter tea, but it was real. Charlotte's memory didn't have to be a source of only pain. It could also be a source of light. "I can hear her laughing," Elena said suddenly, and Marcus nodded because he could hear it too, not literally, but in the way the wind chimed through the garden, in the splash of the fountain, in the delighted gasps of the children as they played among the falling petals. As the sun began to set, painting the garden in shades of gold and pink, Elena and Marcus found themselves alone again. They sat on the marble bench, watching the last of the petals settle into stillness. "I was so angry," Elena said quietly. "At God, at the horse, at myself for letting her ride that day. I was angry at you sometimes, even though I knew it wasn't your fault. I was angry at Charlotte for leaving us, which made me feel guilty, which made me angrier." Marcus took her hand. "I know. I was angry too. I'm still angry sometimes. But sitting here, seeing how much love people had for her, remembering how much joy she brought to everyone." Elena paused, searching for the right words. "I think I'm ready to let the anger go. Not the sadness. I don't think that will ever fully leave. But the anger serves no one, least of all Charlotte's memory." They sat in comfortable silence as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. The palace lights began to twinkle in the distance, and somewhere in the gardens, night-blooming flowers opened their petals to the moon. "Do you think she knows?" Marcus asked. "About the garden? About how much we love her?" Elena smiled, the first genuine smile Marcus had seen from her in 6 months. "Look around us," she said. "This garden is more beautiful than anything we could have planned alone. I think she had a hand in its creation. Don't you?" As if in response to her words, a gentle breeze stirred through the garden, carrying the scent of roses and the sound of wind chimes that hadn't been there moments before. Both Elena and Marcus felt it, a presence that was warm and loving and unmistakably Charlotte. "She's not gone," Elena whispered, understanding flooding through her like sunrise after the longest night. "She's different, she's changed, but she's not gone. She's in every beautiful thing we create in her memory, every act of love we do in her honor, every moment of joy we allow ourselves to feel." Marcus wrapped his arms around his wife, feeling the return of the woman he had fallen in love with. Not unchanged by grief, but transformed by it into someone deeper, more compassionate, more aware of the preciousness of every moment. "We're going to be all right," Elena said. And for the first time since that terrible morning 6 months ago, she truly believed it. "We're going to miss her every day for the rest of our lives, and we're going to love her every day for the rest of our lives. And somehow those two things will help us find our way back to happiness." As they walked back to the palace, hand in hand under a canopy of stars, Elena looked back once at the garden. In the moonlight, she could swear she saw a small figure in a blue dress dancing among the roses, free and joyful and eternal. Charlotte's memory would live on in the garden, in their hearts, and in every moment of beauty they chose to see in the world around them. The grief would always be there, but now it was balanced by love, by hope, and by the unshakable knowledge that some bonds transcend even death itself.